talk about my favorite ways to fish the fire minnow. There's a lot of different ways you can fish this bait. It's an artificial plastic bait, unscented. You can also fish it with scent, like some Pautzke Fire Gel. But most importantly, I want to cover how I actually fish my rig. And my favorite way to fish a fire minnow is under a float. So this is a fire float. And what's nice about these fire floats is they've got a little stem in the middle. Actually, it gets in there pretty good. And if you look closely, there's a slot in the float. And your line goes through the slot, so I'll show you here. Through the slot, and then the stem goes in the top. And that's what pegs the float on the line. And to that, I like to run that down from my main line to a little split shot weight to a swivel. That's a micro swivel. That goes to 6-pound test fluorocarbon leader. I like to run about 12 to 18 inches in length. And again, this is my favorite way to fish the fire minnow, is on a jig head. That's just a ball head, round jig head. And that's 1/16 ounce size. Anything pretty small like that seems to work pretty good for the fire minnow. And what's cool about this is you can get them painted in different colors, switch it up for contrast, match the minnow, however you want to do it. But this is the jig head size in reference to the fire minnow size. And what you do is, with a jig head like this, you can actually put it through the bait, kind of like this. And I like to eyeball it, so I put it here, and I know that my hook needs to poke out right about there. And I put it through the nose and try to poke out right about where I estimated. And you slide the fire minnow up, and you'll see the hook comes out really nice in the back of the bait and rides really nice in the water. So when you're fishing this, you get really nice action out of the fire minnow. And what's really cool about our fire minnows is the plastic itself. So here's another one. If you look at this, you want to get really good action out of a bait, but you don't want to lose the durability. So the fire minnow doesn't just break super easily, and you get really good action out of it. So it's best of both worlds there. The jig head method is my favorite way to fish it. I do want to quickly cover a couple of other ways to fish the fire minnow. If you don't have a jig head, it's no big deal. What you can do is the same thing. So you run a fire float on your line like I showed you. You run a split shot and a swivel right to that same fluorocarbon leader. Again, this is 6-pound test. Depending on where and how you're fishing, you may want to do 4-pound, even 2-pound. But what I do is then I'll just run a second split shot really close to my fire hook, and I'll nose hook that fire minnow, but a second split shot to add some weight down low. And you can adjust that depending on what works best for the scenario, but that'll weigh it down. I got a fire hook and I hooked it right through the nose of the bait. This is a size 10 fire hook, which is this here. I think it works pretty good for the size of the fire minnow, but a lot of those sizes will work just fine. The most important thing when you're fishing it this way, you'll see, is I did leave a good amount of room for that hook to stick out. You don't want to bury it too far into the bait, and I like to hook it right in the nose so it swims nice in the current. That's super effective as well, and then you don't need to have a jig head. The other thing too is if you have our Neds, whether it be the kit or the individual, there is the Ned head in there, which is this right here. Same thing, a nice jig head style for the fire minnow. And you can also use no float. So if you wanted to, you could use no float. You could cast this and retrieve it. You could bounce it off the bottom like it's a Ned. You could put this under a float as well. You'll get really good action out of the bait fishing it that way. And then lastly, if you're fishing like a lake scenario, pretty popular method for lakes and ponds would be like a drop shot style. So what that is a rig like this where the weight is below the actual minnow itself, and then the hook is on there, And you can adjust the length from your weight to your hook, depending on how far you want that minnow to ride off bottom. But that's a pretty popular way. So if that's something you might want to do, you can look up how to tie a fire hook with like a drop shot knot. That's pretty easy to find online. That's a really good way to fish without a float as well.
Pautzke products are available at sporting goods stores near you. If you can't find the specific color, size that you want, make sure to go to Pautzke.com. And as a thank you for watching Pautzke Outdoors, we're going to show you a coupon code to be used for 10% off your next order.